We've heard a lot of excellent messages this year on the topic of courage. Would you agree? There have been the men have really stepped up. But it's time to do a reality check. You've heard the saying, talk is cheap, right? Have you all heard that? It truly is. In preparing this message, it just kind of hit me that been a lot of talk up here about courage. And I'm going to talk about the same thing. But can I live, am I living what I'm going to tell you in regards to courage today? That's the reality of being in the ministry. That's why a lot of our elders aren't particularly crazy about coming up here. Talk is cheap, it really is. But we, in the ministry, can we do what we want to preach? That's a question every true minister that gets up here is going to ask himself. You know, I've heard a lot of pontificating over the years by the ministry on this very topic. And I pick on us because we're to be the leaders. A lot of pontificating about courage. But I got to be honest. Some of the most cowardly men were ministers. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not here to pick on anybody. But we're to be the leaders. And if we can't do it, shame on us. I know that sounds like kind of a downer, but that is a reality check. You know, talk is cheap. Words are plentiful. Deeds are precious. Talk is cheap. It isn't what we say or think that defines us, but what we do is what ultimately defines all of us. Here's a proverb. Young people talk of what they are doing. Old people of what they have done. And fools of what they have a mind to do. You know, we talked a lot about courage, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a way to test how courageous we are or how fearless we are? Would you all want to participate in that? Would you like to know that about yourself? Could there be a way that we could all test ourselves? Young people, would you like that? Would you do it? Well, now I have an activity for next year. I'm not even mentioning it to Mr. Munson or Mr. Fritz, but I have this activity that I'd like to plan for next year. A perfect activity that would determine or help you to realize whether you're fearful. It would help you to understand courage. Trust me, it would. We would see firsthand who's fearless, who's fearful, who's courageous. Great way to test all of us. And it would only take minimal supplies. It would take a round table, 6 chairs. Oh, this is 6 in it, yeah. 6 chairs, a corral. We have a corral over here, don't we, for the horses? We got that already. I would take a hard hat, you want to protect your head, and a vest. like the cowboys wear, right? Protect them. The other thing we need is a mean bull. You volunteer, we'll start with volunteers. You'll sit at that table and I'll turn that bull loose. Now, they cut the tips off the bull, the horn, so they don't kill you. That's comforting. You've seen them at rodeos. You sit around the table, they turn that bull loose. Have you all seen that happen? And the last man or woman sitting is the winner. What do you think, Mr. Munson? Yeah. Would you like to try it? I'm going to get in a lot of trouble with your parents. You're going to have to sign a waiver. I'm going to get in trouble for the parents by this. But it'd be a perfect way to test. And hopefully, would you all love to do that? Yeah, I like that. We'll start with a ministry. Then we'll start with the deacons. Then we'll start with anybody who wants to be a leader. And then we'll work down. But it's a great plan, and Mr. Munson, I'll be talking about that. I know a little bit about that. I had this wise idea that I'd buy a farm. I'd milk a couple cows. I bought a couple Jersey cows. And of course, you need a bull, right? Bought a Jersey bull. Little did I know they're one of the meanest bulls you'll ever be around. And I didn't cut the tips of the horns off. He had horns 8-10 inches. Nice looking bull, big, but mean. So one day I was out walking in the pasture, and I forgot that I turned the bull out there. And I'm in the middle of 20 acres. There's nothing for me to grab. I turn, and here's this bull. We're making eye contact. And he's not happy. And he starts throwing dirt in the air. And I have a decision to make. Courage, right? Fear. I have time to think about it because he's a ways off. But he's throwing dirt, and I know what he's going to do next. And I'm in this open field. I can't run. And I think about Joshua, right? Says, not only have courage, but he commands us not to fear both man and beast. I had time to think about that. I said, okay, I swallow hard. Here comes this bull. He takes out after me. Truly a great test. And I'm standing there, and I have a plan. I stand there perfectly still. Here he comes. He gets within maybe 10 feet of me. And I go, hey! I make myself big, right? He puts on the brakes, circles around. As if that wasn't a big enough test, he throws dirt in the air again. Here he comes again. Do the same thing. It happened about 3 times. Enough for God to test me, right? That's why I say, young people, it's a great test. It is. So I know how it is to be in the middle of the field with a bull. Now, if they ever get you down, if I would have run, he would have mowed me down. They love to get you down and roll you. And a lot of farmers get hurt that way. But it's a perfect test. I know that firsthand. I got carried away here. Where am I? But anyhow, just thought I'd share it with you in regards to courage. But one of my favorite things, especially growing up, and I still do it to this day, I love to read about the young, I love to read about the mighty men. When I was younger, I wouldn't admit it, but there's a lot of mighty women in the Bible. I wouldn't admit to it then, but I do now. So the women are left out. But I read of their great exploits. Now, I use the word exploits because the word clearly explains the actions that put them in a category of Joshua 1:9. It says, be strong and of good courage, right? Exploit means, according to American Heritage Dictionary, achievement, performance, usually a deed or act of some exceptional or remarkable kind. Conspicuous performance, more especially a spirited or heroic act, great or noble achievement. Isn't that what we're all striving for in this life? But I realized when reading about these strong and courageous men and women, I realized something very important. They think different. I challenge you, young people, do a study on all the courageous men and women in the Bible. You will find they think different. And that's where we all want to be. We want to think different. And I'll show you an example of how the world looks at Joshua 1:9, or they fail to look at it. There's a thinking that leads to certain actions, and we'll see that. But they are much different. Their thinking is much different. And I want to learn to think like they do, because they're different. What I also realized was their ability to think and act courageously under great pressure in a crisis situation. Because isn't it always, most of the time under a crisis situation, you're driving along and you come up on an accident, right? And you got to decide whether you're going to help them. We were driving along, I don't know if my kids were in the car. We're driving along, and this car just veers off the road and rolls 3-4 times upside down. And, right, there's a crisis situation. Am I going to help? Am I going to jump in there, or am I going to be afraid? Well, the car might burst in flames. So there was another guy. And these guys were drunk, right? And his head was stuck between the roof. The roof had caved in, and it caught his head between the roof and the seat. So his head wasn't crushed. And he's screaming. Thank God he's drunk. He didn't get hurt. But that's usually, maybe that's not. Well, yeah, let me rethink that. Thank you, Mr. Munson. You get the drift. No, drinking, driving should not be. No, don't do that. But sometimes they survive because their body is very limber, right? That's what I meant by that. I don't encourage drinking and driving. Anyhow, that'll keep you awake. But the best way for me to describe their difference in thinking is found in 1 Samuel 17. Let's go there. 1 Samuel 17. But we find here in 1 Samuel 17 a time of crisis in Israel. A giant Philistine called Goliath, right, shows up at the encampment there in the valley of Elam. So this great giant comes knocking, and what happens? You know, I mentioned earlier that mighty men and women of God think differently. They have the ability to think and act courageously under great pressure or crisis. So I want to start off here by showing you how a typical person reacts under pressure and crisis. That reaction was as prevalent in David's time as it is today. Surprisingly, we have seen the same reaction amongst God's people. As I said, even in the ministry, which is which is a shame, really. They should be the most courageous. And many times it's the brethren that outshine them every time. It should not be. Let's go to 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 11. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, this Goliath, why have you come up to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and you the servant of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Here's a moment of crisis. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, that we may fight together. Then Saul and all Israel did what? They heard these words of the Philistines, and they were dismayed and greatly afraid. I won't turn back because I don't have time already. Out of time. I ain't even getting started here. I got carried away. But Joshua 1:9, if you read it, we haven't read the rest of that story too much this time. But it says, do not fear or be dismayed. God commanded that of us. But what happens? What did Saul and all the army now? These, they're gripped in this fear. But it is a typical reaction that most people have when faced with a crisis. Gripping fear. Saul and Israel were gripped by, it says, great fear. These were battle-hardened men. And they're cowards. How can that be? They're greatly afraid. But that's the life of the world, apart from God. All that simply means they were so overcome by fear that they could do nothing. Fear paralyzes us. That's why God said, root it out. Many people fear and they never go on to live their lives. They have a padlock to the chain, they don't even know it. They can remove the chain, but they choose not to. They want to live in that fear. They want to build a life around that fear. And God said, don't do that. He opens up life, freedom to us. Get rid of the fear because it paralyzes us. You know, young people, you're going to face your Goliaths in life. As I said in speech class, don't fear the world. They're pagans. We're the conquerors. We got backing on high. And when you get in these crisis situations, it'll come to you, I guarantee you. The training you're getting here, if you trust God, will automatically come to you. But now let's notice what the mighty men do and women when Goliath comes knocking on their door. 1 Samuel 17:37. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. Notice David isn't taking any credit. He's a conqueror because he's got power behind him on high. God's got his back. He knows that. That's why he'll go into battle. A garrison, a soldiers show up. And it says, all Israel fled. Run! What did the mighty men do? This field's ours. They drew a line in the sand and said, you ain't coming today. And they killed, 3 men? Stood and held their ground. Now, why did all Israel flee? They're paralyzed by fear. That's what it does, and it'll cause you to run. even when your enemies aren't chasing you. We see that in the world today. You know, God called out a bunch of us people, just regular people. But we're on the greatest adventure ever attempted by human beings. For that matter, God. I hope you see it as an adventure, an opportunity to conquer instead of live in fear. God's got our back. But we're on the greatest adventure. We're going to be the first fruits in the very family of God. Never has it been attempted before. We're writing history. Is that fun? Challenging? I hope it is, young people. You have a choice, young people. You can go down the path of paralyzing fear. It is a choice. Or you can take action. You can draw close to God. Make sure He's got your back. And you'll go forward. Jump in. I want to spend the rest of the sermon time here, or the Bible study. I want to look at the profound example of a strong and courageous woman in the Bible. Trust me, young ladies, I've been on adventure camps with Mr. Munson many times. I've been truly inspired by the young ladies and their courage out there, and mentally tough. And I think, I know this, and I'm not afraid, ashamed to say it, most women are mentally more tough because they have to have babies, right? They're more mentally tough than a lot of men. I know that about you. I've seen it. You're tough. You know, it's been said that often in life it's not the easiest of times, but the hardest that can bring out the best in people. Abigail's life and Bible story is a powerful reflection of that very truth. Instead of wallowing in the self-pity and defeat over her circumstances, she acted courageously. She used great wisdom when faced with crisis. And you'll see her Goliath came knocking. And as I said, courageous men and women think differently, and you'll see that. What can we learn from Abigail's story from the Bible all these years later? It's more than you might think. But she's a profound example of a strong and courageous woman. She respected the man in her life rather than belittle him. Her goal was not to be better than them or him, but rather to bring the best out in not only her husband, but the household she was responsible for. She embodied the godly woman described in Proverbs 31. Even though she lived long before Jesus was born, Abigail demonstrated several of his very characteristics. Isn't that what our goal is, men and women, to reflect God? Well, she did, as we'll see. So who is Abigail in the Bible? Outside of 1 Samuel 25, where she is first introduced, only a few brief mentions of her are found, and these provide only broad strokes of her life. This general lack of information about Abigail might cause us to believe that her importance is equally limited. However, as we're going to see, we will see Abigail's willingness to humble herself, honor God, and honor God's anointed king with remarkable impact. So we're told that Abigail was a woman of understanding and beauty. Those two things she had going for her. She's married to a man named Nabal, who is described as cruel and evil. She finds herself in a tough situation. She's married a dumbbell. I'm sorry. Well, he's actually a fool. but that's where she finds herself. But Abigail's story confirms the accuracy of those descriptions of her, and it provides us a deep look at her character. So before I go any farther, I'd like to give you a little background. In those days, most people working in the fields were shepherds. They kept the flocks of sheep and the herds of goats that were owned by, most of the time, owned by the wealthy. Saul at the time was still king, and most of the official fighting of Israel was done under his command. David and 600 guerrilla fighters have been behind the scenes, fighting various wild tribes in the wilderness there of Paran. They were also protecting these shepherds from attack by various wild tribes that would suddenly overrun the area, stealing livestock and assaulting small villages. The custom of that day, at the time of the sheep shearing, it was common for the owner of animals to set aside a portion of their profits made and given, then those were to given or shared with those who helped protect those flocks. It was kind of like today you could liken it to tipping a waiter or a waitress. And there was no law at that time that you had to do it, but David and his men did that. They protected the sheep in the area, and they expected to get rewarded for a job well done. David and his mighty men had faithfully watched the flocks for Nabal, and word had reached David that Nabal was shearing the sheep. As was the custom, David expects a tip for carefully watching over Nabal's sheep. So it stands to reason today, right? But here's where the problem starts. Nabal, as you will find, is a stingy guy, and he won't pay David. So who is this Nabal guy? When we first meet him, we learn that he was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. Let's go to 1 Samuel 25, verse 2. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. So here's a guy with some bucks. He's got great influence because he's rich. It's interesting that the word Nabal means fool. It doesn't mean the person is simple-minded. In Scripture, a fool is one who says there is no God, and that's how he acted. Go to 1 Samuel 25:3. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. What a combination, huh? But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. So we see harsh means he was hard, stubborn, belligerent. He was also dishonest. That there is a combination in itself. His wife, on the other hand, was just the opposite. Abigail, we're told from Scripture, was both intelligent and beautiful. You could say she was lovely from within and from without. Quite a woman. She is a true role model for young ladies. She was wise in her decision-making from a godly perspective. She was not governed by her emotions, but by good, sound, godly logic. Women, that's your challenge. Don't let your emotions drive you. but have sound, godly logic that comes from studying your Bibles. And says she was keen thinking and intelligent. And I've met many young ladies, and majority of you would fit that bill. I don't know you real well, but I am impressed by the character of these young ladies that we have out here. So let's get back to the story. 1 Samuel 25, 4 through 8. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men. And David said to young men, go up to Carmel and go to Nabal. Greet him in my name, and thus shall you say to him who lives in prosperity, peace be to you. Peace to your house, peace to all that you have. Now I've heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing. David took good care of them. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come to a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David. This is David's plea. He sends a very gracious response, peaceful greeting. But it's interesting, David did not go. And maybe it's because David can be pretty intimidating with 600 men, right? You don't want to show up there with 600 men and go, feed us, right? He wanted it to be of Nabal's free will. But Nabal doesn't realize who he's dealing with. This is a mighty man of war. Notice what Nabal says to him. 1 Samuel 25, 10 through 13. And Nabal answered David's servant and said, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? I don't know who he is. Wrong thing to say. There are many servants nowadays who break away, each one from his master. So he's accusing David. He's a rebel, man. Shall I then take my bread and water and my meat that I have killed for my shears and give it to men when I do not know who they are or from? So David's young men turned on their heels and went back. And they came and told him all these words. And David said to these men, every man gird your sword. It's time. David, again, Nabal has no idea who he's doing with. So grab your swords. So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed behind with the supplies. So David takes out after Nabal with 400 men. That's like killing a roach with a shotgun. Here's David, pretty fired up, 400 men. He's going to go take care of the problem. But we'll see as later, thankfully, Abigail, who was a level-headed woman, stopped David in his tracks, as we'll see, from doing great harm. Notice who the hero is, or the hero that comes on the scene. 1 Samuel 25, 14 through 17. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled him. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us both by night and day. Talking about David here and the good work that he had done. And all the time we were with him, keeping the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all the household. David said, that's it. I'm coming after him. For he is such a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him. The message came to Abigail, not to Nabal. They knew enough not to tell him. He was not approachable, basically what they were saying. And this is another indication of Abigail's wisdom. Abigail is not paralyzed with fear when she hears that David's coming to clean the house down. He's going to kill every man. That's his intent. He's going to wipe out his entire household. It is a crisis moment. Goliath is knocking on the door. Notice her strength and courage as she springs into action. Notice she isn't paralyzed with fear. She springs into action. 1 Samuel 25, 18 through 22. Notice what she does. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 shifts of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cates of figs, and loaded them on a donkey. She is focused. She's not fearful. And she said to her servants, "Go on before me. See, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Isn't that interesting? She knows what would happen if she told him. He would absolutely forbid her to do this. So it was as she rode on the donkey that she went down under cover of the hill. And there was David and his men coming down the hill. And she met them. Now David had said, "Surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all the belongings to him. And he has repaid me evil for good. May God do so also to the enemies of David, if I leave one male who belongs to him by morning light." So David goes, "I'm going to wipe them all out. I've got the sword." It's done. Remember, David's a mighty man. He doesn't know what fear is. But can you picture David and his mighty men coming full tilt down this hill? Their stomachs are growling, and every mile they take to get madder. You wait till I get a hold of them. So they're pretty intense, and they get madder every mile. The closer they get to the ranch down there, they're ready. 1 Samuel 25, 23 through 31. I'm running a little bit slow here, but beg forgiveness later. Now, when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly. Now, notice, she doesn't hesitate. So she dismounted quickly, fell on her face before David, and bowed to the ground. Are you ladies humble enough to do that? Notice Abigail, she bows to the ground. So she fell at his feet and said, "Oh, my Lord, on me let iniquity be." Sounds like Jesus Christ, doesn't it? I'll take it on. Don't harm them. I'm here to block your way. Take it out on me. Kill me if that's what it means. She throws her life on David. She exchanges her life for all those men he's going to kill. "And please let your maidservant speak your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my Lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, for as his name is so." She's just telling the truth. She's honest. "Nabal is his name, and folly is with him." She knows who she married. "But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and for revenging yourself with your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek harm for the Lord, my Lord, be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant. For the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord. Notice how she knows this David. How does she know so much about him? And evil is not found in you throughout your days. What a statement. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from a pocket of a sling. And it shall come to pass when the Lord has done for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel. She knows he's going to be the king. And this will be no grief for you, not offense to the heart, to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. She's correcting him. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. What a speech, huh? Short. But here's a woman of great courage. But it shows, it demonstrates her humility, her courage, her lack of fear, especially faced with a critical decision. She jumps into action. So what's the outcome of Abigail's inspiring plea? Notice David here in 1 Samuel 25:32. Then David said to Abigail, notice what he says to her, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept this day from coming to bloodshed and from avenging myself on by my own hand." David realizes what she had done. David was going to avenge his hand, and he knew better. God is our avenger. "For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no male would have been left to Nabal." He was clearly focused, David was. So David received from her hand what she had brought to him, and said to her, and notice, he says, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your persons." Here's David, the future king. And he melts like putty in her hands. He doesn't know what to do. All he can do is, oh, great she is, right? This woman just disarmed him, took his sword, these 300 men were mush, right? When she got done, the power of a woman. Men, there it is. Because Abigail's willingness to be a tool in God's hands, David admits it. God sent her. And it caused David, he realizes that she brought him back to his senses. But David, a mighty man of war, a valiant man, becomes putty. She just disarms him. But God has honored and preserved Abigail's story for all time. That story of great courage and strength. You know, isn't it amazing when you do what is right without tiring, God then takes care of the impossible things. He's got your back. Just do what he told you to do. And he's telling you, he's commanding you, do not fear. That's going to be important moving forward. Don't fear. They're the cowards, not us. But Abigail is a sterling example of what it means to be strong, courageous, to be fearless. She was not paralyzed with fear. Fear paralyzes. But she had a plan. God inspired that plan because she had the courage. God could use her. But she's one of the many men and women of the Bible of great courage.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2022, Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.